Captain Daeho Kim stood at the viewing port of Luna Station and stared at the ship that would either save Earth or become his tomb. The HSS Defiance floated in the darkness like a sleeping giant. Her hull was dark gray and covered with strange bumps and angles that made no sense to anyone who looked at her. She did not look like the sleek warships that other species built. She looked rough and ugly and forgotten. "She is not much to look at, is she, Captain?" said Admiral Jae-Sung Lee as he walked up behind Daeho. The admiral was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting political battles on Earth for months, trying to keep the peace with the alien empire that was coming closer every day. Daeho turned to face his superior officer. "Sir, with respect, she looks exactly like what we need right now. Something they will not expect." The admiral smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "The galactic hegemony has conquered over 10,000 worlds, Captain. They have ships that can destroy entire planets. They have warriors bred for war since birth. What makes you think one old prototype can make any difference?" "Because, sir, this old prototype was built by humans, and humans do not give up." The two men walked through the station corridors toward the docking bay, where the Defiance waited. Other officers and technicians moved past them, but everyone seemed to avoid looking directly at the captain and admiral. Everyone knew what was coming. The aliens had sent their demands 3 days ago: submit or be destroyed. Every world that had refused was now a burning rock floating in space. "Tell me about the ship, Captain," Admiral Lee said as they reached the airlock. Daeho activated his personal datapad and pulled up the technical specifications. She was designed 15 years ago by engineer Soman Park. The military rejected her design because it was too different from standard doctrine. They said it was a waste of resources. And now we are betting everything on a design the military called worthless. "Yes, sir. Because Soman Park understood something that our generals did not. She understood that we cannot beat the aliens at their own game. We have to play a different game entirely." They stepped through the airlock and into the Defiance. The corridor was narrow and lined with pipes and cables that hummed with energy. The ship felt alive in a way that other vessels did not. Everything was designed to be repaired and modified quickly. There were access panels everywhere and tool storage built into the walls. "Captain on deck," called out a young woman in engineering coveralls. This was Hae-Jin Choi, the ship's tactical officer. She had graduated top of her class from the Naval Academy, but had been assigned to the Defiance because she asked too many questions and challenged too many assumptions. "At ease, Hae-Jin. Where is Engineer Park?" "She is in the main engineering section, sir. She has been working on the new modifications for 36 hours straight. I think she is running on pure caffeine and determination at this point." They made their way deeper into the ship. The Defiance was smaller than a standard cruiser, but every space was used efficiently. There were no grand halls or impressive displays of wealth like the alien ships had. Everything here had a purpose, and everything could be changed if needed. They found Soman Park, elbow deep in a control panel with sparks flying around her hands. She was a small woman with short black hair and clothes that were permanently stained with engine grease. When she heard them approach, she looked up and smiled. "Admiral Lee, Captain Kim, perfect timing. I just finished installing the new adaptive learning protocols. The ship can now modify her own systems based on combat data in real time." Admiral Lee looked confused. "Engineer Park, could you explain that in terms a simple military man can understand?" Salmin wiped her hands on a rag and stood up. "Think of it this way, sir. Most ships are like swords. They are built for one purpose, and they are very good at that purpose. But if you need to cut down a tree, a sword is not very useful. You need an axe, and the Defiance is different. How the Defiance is like a Swiss Army knife, sir. She can be a sword when you need a sword. She can be an axe when you need an axe. She can be a screwdriver or a can opener or anything else the situation requires. She learns and adapts." Daeho nodded. "The aliens have never faced an enemy that changes tactics in the middle of a battle. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and rigid hierarchy. They do the same thing every time because it has always worked. Until now," Hae-Jin added. "I have been studying their battle records. They always use the same formations, the same attack patterns, the same communication protocols. They are predictable." Admiral Lee looked around the engineering section. "And you think this ship can take advantage of that predictability?" "Not just this ship, sir," Soman said. "I have been working with the shipyards to modify our entire fleet. We cannot build ships as powerful as theirs, but we can build ships that think differently. Ships that adapt and survive." Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and an automated voice announced all hands to battle stations. Unknown vessels detected at the edge of the solar system. The 4 humans looked at each other. They all knew this moment would come, but it felt too soon. Earth was not ready. The fleet was not ready. But ready or not, the aliens were here. "How long do we have?" Admiral Lee asked. Hae-Jin was already at a communications console. "Long-range sensors show 12 ships, sir. They are maintaining standard Imperial formation and broadcasting on all frequencies. They want to talk. Put them through to the main screen." The view screen flickered and showed the bridge of an alien warship. The creature that appeared was tall and reptilian with golden scales and cold yellow eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like gravel being crushed. I am Commander Veltar of the Galactic Hegemony. You will surrender your world immediately or face destruction. You have 1 hour to comply. Admiral Lee stepped forward. This is Admiral Jason Lee of the Earth Defense Force. We reject your demands. Earth is not for sale. The alien commander laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. Then you will burn like all the others. We have given you the chance to live as slaves. Now you will die as fools. The transmission ended. The 4 humans stood in silence for a moment. So that is it then, Admiral Lee said quietly. 12 alien warships against our entire fleet. What are our chances, Engineer Park? So Min looked at her beloved ship and smiled. Sir, our chances are exactly what we make them. The aliens think they know what humans are capable of. They are about to learn they were wrong. Captain Daeho Kim walked to the bridge of the Defiance. In 1 hour the battle for Earth would begin. The aliens expected him to follow standard military doctrine. They expected him to line up his ships and fight like a gentleman. They expected him to lose quickly and quietly. They had no idea what humans were really capable of when their backs were against the wall. The alien fleet moved through space like a pack of metal sharks. 12 massive ships, each one 3 times larger than the Defiance. Their hulls gleamed silver in the starlight and energy weapons glowed blue along their sides. They moved in perfect formation like they had done this dance 1,000 times before. Captain Daeho Kim watched them approach on the main screen of the Defiance. His crew was silent and tense. Everyone knew they were about to face an enemy that had never lost a battle. An enemy that had crushed worlds with fleets 10 times larger than what Earth could field. Tactical report. Haijin Daeho said calmly. Haijin Choi worked at her console with quick, precise movements. 12 hegemony cruisers, sir, each one carrying approximately 50 energy cannons and 20 missile tubes. They have full shield coverage and armor plating that can withstand nuclear weapons. Combined firepower is enough to glass a continent. And our forces. The Defiance plus 6 patrol boats and 3 destroyers. We are outnumbered 4-1 and outgunned 22-1. Engineer Soman Park looked up from her station. Captain, the enemy ships are scanning us. Their computers are trying to analyze our weapon systems and defensive capabilities. Let them scan, Daeho said with a slight smile. What do they see? Soman, they see a small, outdated human ship with basic weapons and weak shields. They have no idea what we really are. The alien commander's voice crackled over the communications system. Human vessel, you have 30 minutes to surrender. We grow tired of waiting. Daeho picked up the microphone. Commander Veltar, is Captain Kim? We need more time to consider your generous offer. You have exactly 30 minutes, human. Then we demonstrate why resistance is futile. The transmission ended. Daeho turned to his crew. Everyone knows the plan. We are not here to win a straight fight. We are here to survive long enough to learn how they fight. Every piece of information we gather makes the next battle easier. The human ships spread out across the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The Defiance took position behind a large rock that was half the size of Earth's moon. The other ships found their own hiding places among the floating debris. Sir, the enemy is moving to attack formation, Haijin reported. They are spreading out to surround our position. Good. That means they are following standard doctrine. So men are the learning systems active. All sensors are recording, sir. The ship's computer is analyzing their movement patterns, shield frequencies, and weapon signatures. We will know everything about them within the first few minutes of combat. The alien ships began their assault exactly as their training manuals required. They formed a wide circle around the asteroid belt and began systematic bombardment. Massive energy beams lanced out from their weapons and turned asteroids into glowing vapor. The display of power was meant to terrify any enemy into immediate surrender. But the human ships were no longer where the aliens expected them to be. Now Haijin, Daeho ordered. The Defiance suddenly appeared from behind a different asteroid than where she had been hiding. Her weapons were small compared to the alien guns, but they were aimed at very specific targets. The first shot hit the lead alien ship's shield generator. The second shot hit their main sensor array. Direct hits, sir. Enemy ships' shields are down and they are flying blind. Move to position 2. Execute Maneuver Delta. The Defiance vanished back into the asteroid field like a ghost. The alien ships turned to pursue, but found themselves shooting at rocks in empty space. Their massive weapons were designed to destroy cities, not hunt small ships in a maze of floating debris. Sir, I am detecting confusion in their communications, reported Yuan-Ji Nam, the ship's communications officer. They are asking each other where we went. Their formation is breaking down. Commander Veltar's voice came over the radio. He sounded angry now instead of bored. Humans, you fight like cowards. Face us in honorable combat. Daeho smiled. Honor is for species that can afford it. We fight to survive. The hit-and-run attacks continued for 2 hours. The human ships would appear, fire a few precise shots, and then disappear back into the asteroid field. Each attack was carefully planned to target the alien ship's weaknesses. Shield generators, sensor arrays, communication equipment, weapon targeting systems. Sir, the enemy is adapting, Hyjin warned. They are sending fighters into the asteroid field to flush us out. Expected. Soman, how are our learning systems doing? We now have complete data on their shield frequencies, weapon power cycles, and tactical doctrine. The ship's computer has identified 17 different weaknesses in their design. 17. That seems like a lot for such an advanced species. They are advanced, sir, but they are not adaptable. Every ship is identical. Every weapon system is standardized. Every tactic is from the same playbook. They have optimized for fighting other Imperial fleets, not for fighting humans. The alien fighters swarmed into the asteroid field like angry wasps. They were fast and deadly, but they were also predictable. The human ships had prepared for this moment. Release the drones, Deho ordered. Hundreds of small repair drones launched from the human ships. They were not designed as weapons, but Soman had modified them with simple explosive charges. They looked like pieces of asteroid debris on the alien sensors, but they were actually guided missiles that could think for themselves. The alien fighters found themselves under attack from what seemed like the asteroids themselves. Chunks of rock suddenly came alive and exploded against their hulls. The fighters tried to retreat, but the drones followed them back to their mother ships. Sir, 3 enemy fighters destroyed. 2 more, heavily damaged. They are recalling their remaining fighters. Good. Now we spring the real trap. For the past 2 hours, the human ships had been doing more than just hit-and-run attacks. They had been placing small devices throughout the asteroid field. Devices that Soman had designed based on human mining technology. Detonate charges on my mark, Deho said. 3-2-1 mark. The asteroid field exploded. Not with the massive destruction of military weapons, but with the precise controlled explosions of mining charges. Hundreds of asteroids broke apart and began tumbling through space in carefully calculated directions. The alien ships suddenly found themselves in the middle of a debris storm. Chunks of rock the size of buildings crashed into their hulls at incredible speeds. Their shields could stop energy weapons, but they were not designed to handle physical impacts from multiple directions. Enemy formation is completely disrupted, sir. 3 ships have collision damage. 2 more are dead in space. All ships attack now. Target the damaged vessels. The human fleet emerged from the chaos like wolves, attacking a scattered herd. The Defiance led the charge with her weapons firing at maximum rate, but these were not random shots. Every beam was aimed at the weak points the ship's computer had identified during the long hunt. The first alien ship exploded in a ball of fire. The second lost power and began drifting helplessly. The third tried to run, but found its engines damaged by asteroid impacts. Commander Veltar's voice came over the radio one last time. This is impossible. We are the hegemony. We do not lose to inferior species. You just did, Deho replied. Quietly. When the battle ended, 6 alien ships were destroyed and 3 more were crippled. Only 3 ships managed to escape back to Imperial space. The human fleet had lost 1 destroyer and suffered minor damage to 2 other ships. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from Earth, Yonji reported. Admiral Lee wants to speak with you. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen. He looked shocked. Captain Kim, what just happened out there? Our sensors showed that you actually won. We learned, sir. We learned that the enemy is not invincible. They are just used to fighting enemies who follow the same rules they do. We do not follow their rules. What happens now, Captain? Deho looked at his crew. They were exhausted but smiling. Now, sir, we prepare for the real fight, because when the Empire learns what happened here, they are going to send a lot more than 12 ships. How many more? All of them, sir, all of them. The news of Commander Veltar's defeat reached the Imperial capital world of Hegemon Prime in 7 days. The massive planet, covered in crystal towers and floating cities, had not received word of a military defeat in over 2 centuries. When the 3 surviving ships limped into orbit, their crews were immediately brought before the Imperial High Command. Emperor Zethmer sat on his throne of black metal and listened to the report with growing interest. He was an apex, the most evolved species in the galaxy. His people were 10 feet tall, with skin like polished stone, and minds that could process information faster than most computers. They had built the hegemony through superior intelligence and ruthless efficiency. Tell me again about these humans, the Emperor said to the trembling ship captain who had survived the battle. Your Majesty, they fought like nothing we have ever seen. They used the asteroid field as a weapon. They turned mining equipment into guided missiles. They seemed to know exactly where our weak points were before we even fired a shot. War Marshal Kretak stepped forward. He was a massive creature from the warrior caste with 4 arms and natural armor covering his entire body. My lord, this was clearly just luck. No inferior species could defeat Imperial ships through skill alone. The Emperor raised one clawed hand for silence. Marshal, you have conquered 43 worlds for the Empire. In all those campaigns, did any enemy ever use mining equipment as weapons? No, my lord, but did any enemy ever turn an entire asteroid field into a trap? No, my lord. Then perhaps these humans are not as inferior as we assumed. The Emperor stood and walked to the great window that looked out over his capital city. Send word to Prince Verdun. Tell him to assemble the 7th Battle Fleet. 200 ships should be sufficient to deal with one small human world. War Marshal Kretak bowed low. Yes, my lord, the prince will crush these humans and restore imperial honor. See that he does, Marshal. The other species in our empire are watching. If word spreads that humans can defeat our forces, there might be rebellions. We cannot allow that. Meanwhile, on Earth, the victory celebration was already ending. Captain Daeho Kim stood in the war room, deep beneath Earth's military headquarters. The walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays, showing the movements of Imperial fleets throughout the galaxy. Admiral Jae-Soon Lee pointed to a red cluster of dots moving toward the solar system. Long-range sensors picked them up this morning. 200 ships moving in battle formation. They will be here in 6 weeks. 200. Engineer Soman Park whistled softly. They are not taking any chances this time. Can we build enough ships to face them? Asked Haijin Choi. Admiral Lee shook his head. The shipyards are working around the clock, but we can maybe build 50 new ships in 6 weeks. Against 200 Imperial vessels, that is still suicide. Daeho studied the tactical display. We are not going to fight them ship to ship. We learned something important in the last battle. The Empire expects us to follow their rules. When we break those rules, they do not know how to respond. What are you thinking, Captain? Soman asked. I am thinking that we need to make this a different kind of war entirely. Not a battle between fleets, but a test of who can adapt faster. Over the next month, Earth became a giant workshop. Every factory, every shipyard, every research facility worked on the same project. They were not just building ships. They were building a new way to fight. Engineer Taeyong Han was a young genius who had joined Soman's team after the first battle. He had an idea that seemed crazy until you thought about it carefully. What if our ships could share information instantly, not just communication, but actual tactical data? Shield frequencies, weapon patterns, enemy movements, everything. A network, Soman said thoughtfully. Like the internet, but for warships. Exactly. Every human ship becomes part of a larger intelligence. When one ship learns something, they all learn it. Meanwhile, communications officer Yoonji Nam was working on a different project. She had studied the recordings from the first battle and noticed something important about Imperial communications. They used the same command codes throughout their entire fleet, she explained to Captain Daeho. Every ship responds to the same frequencies. If we can break their encryption, we can listen to everything they say, and if we can listen, we can predict what they will do next. Better than that, sir. If we can break their codes, we might be able to send them false orders. The third innovation came from Marine Commander Gi-1 Seo. He was a veteran of ground combat who understood that sometimes, the best way to defeat an enemy was to get inside their defenses. These Imperial ships are huge, he explained. Thousands of crew members. Complex life support systems. But I bet they have never had to deal with boarding parties that do not play by the rules. What kind of rules? Admiral Lee asked. Honor. Sir, every species the Empire has fought follows some kind of warrior code. They announce their attacks. They fight face to face. They try to capture territory and hold it. We do not have to do any of that. By the time the Imperial fleet arrived, at the edge of the solar system, Earth was ready. Not ready to fight the kind of battle the Empire expected, but ready to fight the kind of battle that humans were good at. Prince Verdun commanded the 7th Battle Fleet from his flagship, the Eternal Glory. He was young for an Imperial prince, only 300 years old, but he had never lost a battle. The idea that primitive humans had defeated an Imperial force seemed impossible to him. Communications officer, send the standard surrender demand, he ordered. Yes, Your Highness. Transmitting. Now. The response came back within minutes. Captain Daeho Kim appeared on the main screen of the Imperial flagship. He looked calm and confident, which surprised the prince. Prince Verdun, this is Captain Kim of the Earth Defense Force. We have reviewed your terms and we respectfully decline. Then, you will share the fate of every world that has defied the Empire. You will burn. Maybe, Prince, but you might be surprised at how much burning we can do in return. The transmission ended. Prince Verdun turned to his tactical officer. Begin the attack. Standard formation. Concentrate fire on their largest ships first. Yes, Your Highness. The Imperial fleet moved into position like a giant metal storm cloud. 200 ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. Their weapons could destroy mountains. Their shields could withstand the heart of a star. They had never failed to conquer any world they attacked. But as they approached Earth, something strange began to happen. The human ships did not line up. In battle formation, they did not charge forward to meet the Imperial fleet in glorious combat. Instead, they scattered in all directions like leaves in the wind. Sir, the enemy fleet is breaking apart. reported the tactical officer. They appear to be running away. Prince Verdan frowned. Cowards. Well then we will hunt them down one by one. Order all ships to pursue and destroy. That was exactly what Captain Deho had hoped he would say. The Imperial fleet broke formation. To chase the scattered human vessels, 200 ships became 200 individual hunters, each one pursuing a different target. The rigid Imperial command structure that had conquered thousands of worlds suddenly became a weakness. Because the humans were not running away. They were leading the Imperial ships into the largest trap in military history. All ships, this is Captain Kim Deho, broadcast on the secured human network. The enemy has taken the bait. Begin Phase 2. Throughout the solar system, 50 human ships suddenly stopped running and turned to fight. But they were not fighting alone. Every ship was connected to every other ship through Taeyong's network. When one ship detected an enemy weakness, all the ships knew about it instantly. And thanks to Yanji's code breaking, every human commander could hear the Imperial battle orders before the Imperial ships received them. The hunt was about to become a massacre. The trap closed around the Imperial fleet like the jaws of a giant predator. Prince Verdan realized too late that his 200 ships were no longer fighting as one massive force. They were spread across the entire solar system chasing what they thought were fleeing human vessels. Sir, we are receiving contradictory orders, reported the communications officer on the flagship Eternal Glory. Fleet Command is ordering us to regroup, but Admiral Decaron is telling his squadron to continue pursuit. Prince Verdan frowned. I gave no such order to Admiral Decaron. Contact him directly. Sir Admiral Decaron reports that he received the pursuit order directly from you 5 minutes ago. That is impossible. I have been on the bridge the entire time. Communications officer Yoonji Nam smiled as she watched her false orders spread chaos through the Imperial fleet. From her station aboard the Defiance, she could hear every Imperial transmission and send fake messages that looked completely authentic. Captain, the enemy fleet is now split into 12 separate groups, she reported to Deho. Each group thinks they are following different orders from their prince. Excellent, Taeyong. How is the network performing? Engineer Taeyong Han monitored the data flowing between all 50 human ships. All vessels are sharing tactical information in real time, sir. When Ship 7 identifies a weak point in an Imperial shield, every other ship knows about it instantly. And our ammunition reserves. This is where it gets interesting, Captain. We are using their own weapons against them. The human ships had been doing more than just running away. Every time an Imperial ship fired at them, the humans collected the energy signatures and analyzed them. Now their own weapons were calibrated to fire Imperial frequency energy beams. Sir, we have a problem, called out Hyjin from her tactical station. 3 Imperial squadrons are converging on our position. 36 ships total. Captain Deho looked at the tactical display. 36 ships against 1. Any sane military commander would retreat immediately. But Captain Deho Kim was not interested in being sane. Signal the other ships, execute Plan Gamma, and get me Marine Commander GI-1 on the line. Marine Commander GI-1 SEO was floating in space inside a stealth pod no larger than a coffin. Around him, 19 other Marines waited in similar pods. They had been drifting through space for 2 hours waiting for this moment. Commander, this is Captain Kim. The Imperial Squadron is approaching your position. Are you ready? Ready as we will ever be, sir. These Imperial ships are about to learn why humans do not fight fair. The 36 Imperial ships moved toward the Defiance in perfect formation. Their weapons powered up and their shields glowed with deadly energy. To them, this looked like an easy kill. One small human ship against 36 Imperial cruisers. Then the Defiance did something that broke every rule of space combat. Instead of trying to run or fight, she opened her cargo bay and ejected her entire supply of spare parts into space. Thousands of pieces of metal and electronics spread out in a cloud around the ship. Sir, the human vessel is dumping debris, reported the Imperial tactical officer. Should we continue the attack? Of course, continue. They are obviously desperate. Destroy them. The Imperial ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missiles filled space with destruction. The cloud of debris around the Defiance exploded in brilliant flashes of light. When the light faded, the Defiance was gone. Target destroyed, sir. Excellent. All ships reform and continue hunting the remaining human vessels. But the Defiance was not destroyed. She was hiding inside the wreckage of her own spare parts using a trick that Soman Park had learned from studying octopuses. The ship's hull could change color and texture to match whatever was around it. Now GI-1, Captain Deho whispered into his communicator. The 20 marine pods suddenly came alive. They had been disguised as pieces of debris floating in space. Now they activated their magnetic grapples and attached themselves to the hulls of the Imperial ships like ticks on a dog. Boarding parties away, sir. We are cutting through their hull plating now. What happened next had never occurred in the history of Imperial warfare. Human Marines began appearing inside Imperial ships through holes cut in the outer hull, but they did not try to capture territory or fight. honorable duels with the crew. Instead, they did things that no civilized species would ever consider. They cut power cables. They released toxic gases into the air systems. They hacked into the ship computers and changed the security codes. They turned the ship's own defensive systems against the crew. "Sir, this is Admiral Decaron," came a panicked voice over the Imperial Communications Network. "My ships are under attack by boarders. They are not fighting us, they are sabotaging everything. Half my ships have lost power, and the other half are shooting at each other." Prince Verdun felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. All ships returned to defensive formation immediately. Prepare for close quarters combat. But the Imperial ships could not form up because they could no longer trust their own communications. Every order might be real, or it might be a human trick. Every message might come from their own commanders, or from the enemy. Meanwhile, the real battle was just beginning. The 50 human ships stopped running and turned to fight. But they fought like a pack of wolves, not like traditional warships. When one ship was damaged, the others covered its retreat. When one ship found a weakness, all the others exploited it immediately. The Defiance suddenly appeared in the middle of the Imperial formation like a magic trick. Her weapons fired not at the enemy ships, but at the space between them. The beams created a web of energy that interfered with Imperial sensors and communications. "Sir, we cannot see anything," reported the Imperial tactical officer. "All sensors are being jammed." "Then fire blind. Destroy everything in our vicinity." The Imperial ships began firing wildly in all directions, but their own weapons were being turned against them. The human ships had learned to redirect Imperial energy beams using specially designed mirror shields. The Imperial fleet found itself shooting at its own ships. "Sir, we have lost 12 vessels to friendly fire," came another panicked report. "Impossible. Our targeting systems are perfect." "Sir, the targeting systems are working perfectly. They are targeting Imperial ships because they think Imperial ships are the enemy." Engineer Somin Park had been busy during the 2 hours of chase. She had used the time to hack into Imperial targeting computers through their own sensor beams. Now she could make any Imperial ship appear to be a human vessel on their own screens. The battle became a nightmare of confusion and friendly fire. Imperial ships shot at each other while human vessels danced between them like ghosts. The rigid Imperial command structure collapsed completely when no one could tell who was giving real orders and who was an enemy spy. Prince Verdun tried desperately to regain control. All ships ceased fire immediately. Reform defensive positions around the flagship, but only half his ships received the order. The other half were following false commands from Yunji that told them to continue attacking. The Imperial fleet tore itself apart while the humans watched and waited. "Sir, enemy fleet strength is down to 130 ships, Haijin reported. 70 ships lost to friendly fire and sabotage. They are completely disorganized. Time to finish this. All ships attack Formation Delta. Target the command vessels first." The human fleet struck like lightning. 50 ships moving with perfect coordination against an enemy that could no longer coordinate anything. The networked human ships shared every piece of information instantly while the Imperial ships could not even communicate with each other reliably. One by one, the Imperial command ships exploded under concentrated human fire. Prince Verdun watched his perfect fleet die around him, and finally understood what his uncle, the Emperor, had failed to grasp. These humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new and terrifying. An enemy that learned and adapted faster than any computer. An enemy that turned strength into weakness and order into chaos. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human commander," his communications officer reported. Captain Daeho Kim appeared on the screen. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiance hummed with quiet efficiency. "Prince Verdun, this is your last chance to surrender. You have lost this battle. Your choice now is whether your remaining crews live or die." The prince looked around his damaged bridge. Half his fleet was gone, his communications were compromised. His troops were fighting shadows they could not see or understand. For the first time in Imperial history, a prince of the hegemony spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. "Human commander, this is Prince Vorden. I surrender." The news of Prince Verdun's surrender spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds that had bowed before Imperial might, the impossible had happened. The Galactic hegemony had been defeated not by another empire but by a single small world that refused to kneel. On the prison world of Kethmorin, the alien slaves working in the crystal mines heard the whispered news and dared to hope. On the farming world of Velsaria, the conquered people looked up at the sky and wondered if freedom was possible. On the industrial world of Zephyr, the workers began to speak in hushed voices about rebellion. Emperor Zethmir stood in his throne room on Hegemon Prime and felt something he had not experienced in 500 years: uncertainty. The massive holographic display showed the locations of Imperial fleets throughout the galaxy. Green dots for loyal systems, red dots for systems. In rebellion, there were far too many red dots. "My lord, we have confirmed reports of uprisings on 47 worlds," War Marshal Kretak reported. The rebels are using human tactics, hit and run attacks, sabotage, psychological warfare. Our commanders do not know how to respond. What about the remaining ships of the 7th Fleet? Prince Verdan is being held prisoner on Earth, along with 63 ships and their crews. The humans have not harmed them, but they refuse all demands for their release. The Emperor's clawed hands grip the arms of his throne. 63 Imperial ships. The humans now have access to our technology, our weapons, our tactical databases. They will learn everything. Yes, my lord, and they will share that knowledge with every rebel world in the galaxy. On Earth, Captain Daeho Kim walked through the captured Imperial flagship, Eternal Glory, with engineer Soman Park and communications officer Yoongji Nam. The massive ship was 10 times larger than the Defiance, but it felt cold and lifeless compared to the human vessel. Everything is automated, Soman observed as they examined the engine room. The Imperial crews just follow procedures. They never question anything or try to improve the systems. That is why they lost. Yoongji added, they cannot adapt when something unexpected happens. Look at their communication systems. Every message goes through a central command hierarchy. If you disrupt the command structure, the entire fleet becomes helpless. Prince Verdan sat in comfortable captivity in what had once been his own ready room. He was not mistreated, but he was also not free to leave. When Captain Daeho entered the room, the prince looked up with something that might have been respect. Captain Kim, I have been thinking about our battle. I commanded the finest fleet in Imperial history. Ships that had never known defeat. Warriors bred for combat since birth. How did you win? Daeho sat down across from the prince. Your Highness, you made the same mistake that every Imperial commander makes. You assumed that there was only one way to fight a war. And what way? Is that honor, sir? Glory. Following the rules that your ancestors wrote. You fight like knights in shining armor. We fight like survivors. Is there no honor in human warfare? There is honor, your Highness. But our honor comes from protecting our people and our world. Not from following ancient traditions that get our soldiers killed. Prince Verdan was quiet for a long moment. What will happen to me and my crews? That depends on what happens next. Your uncle, the Emperor, can choose to end this war, or he can choose to make it worse. If he chooses to end it, you will all go home. If he chooses to make it worse, then you will stay here until the war is over. And if the war never ends, then, your Highness, you will have plenty of time to learn new ways of thinking. Meanwhile, on dozens of worlds across the galaxy, the rebellion was spreading. The humans had done something that no conquered species had ever managed. They had proven that the Empire could be beaten. More importantly, they had shown other species how to beat them. On Kethmoran, the slave miners used human tactics to seize control of the crystal mines. Instead of fighting the Imperial guards directly, they cut power lines and released sleeping gas into the ventilation systems. When the guards woke up, they found themselves locked in their own detention cells. On Valseria, the farmers used human-style coordination to overwhelm the Imperial administration. Every farm family acted at exactly the same time across the entire planet. The Imperial garrison found itself facing not an army but an entire world that had simply decided to stop obeying orders. On Zefter, the factory workers turned their manufacturing facilities into weapons production centers overnight. The humans had shared the technical specifications for their adaptive weapon systems with every rebel world. Now the Empire faced enemies armed with their own technology modified by human creativity. Emperor Zethmer called an emergency session of the Imperial High Council. Representatives from all the major species in the Empire gathered in the Great Hall, but the mood was tense and fearful. My lord, the rebellions are spreading faster than we can contain them, reported Admiral Kesher of the Imperial Navy. Every time we send a fleet to crush one uprising, 3 more begin elsewhere. What makes these rebellions different from previous ones? The Emperor asked. They are coordinated, my lord. The rebels share information across the galaxy instantly. When one group learns an effective tactic, all the other groups use it immediately. It is like fighting a single enemy with 10,000 bodies. War Marshal Kretak stepped forward. My lord, I propose that we gather our remaining fleets and attack Earth directly. If we destroy the human homeworld, the rebellions will lose their inspiration and their tactical support. How many ships would such an attack require? At least 1,000, my lord. Perhaps 1,500 to be certain of victory. The Emperor considered this. Assemble the fleets, Marshal, but understand that this is our final gamble. If we fail to destroy Earth, the Empire will fall. My lord, with respect, the Empire is already falling. The humans have shown every conquered species that we are not invincible. If we do not destroy them quickly, there will be nothing left to save. 3 days later, the largest fleet in galactic history began moving toward Earth. 1,500 Imperial ships from across the galaxy converged on the human homeworld. It was a force large enough to conquer entire sectors of space, but the humans were ready. Captain Daeho stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the approaching armada on his tactical display. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They had faced impossible odds before, and they had survived by being smarter and more adaptable than their enemies. Sir, we are receiving messages from our allies, Yunji reported. 43 rebel worlds are sending support fleets. Total allied ships approximately 300 rebel ships plus our 100 Earth vessels against 1,500 Imperial ships. Hygiene calculated. We are still outnumbered almost 4 to 1. The odds have been worse, Soman said with a smile. Remember, we are not trying to destroy their entire fleet. We just need to break their will to fight. Admiral Jae-Sung Lee appeared on the main screen from Earth Command. Captain Kim, the Imperial fleet will reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Are you ready? As ready as we can be, sir. The rebels have learned everything we can teach them. Now we find out if human tactics work for other species, and if they do not. Daeho looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Human faces. That showed determination instead of fear. Then, sir, we make our last stand here at Earth. But we make it count. The final battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. 1,500 ships against 400, the largest empire in galactic history, against a single world and its rebel allies. But numbers alone would not decide this battle. The real question was whether the rigid Imperial system could adapt fast enough to survive contact with human ingenuity and alien desperation working together. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The final battle began at dawn over Earth. 1,500 Imperial ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, like a metal storm cloud covering half the sky. War Marshal Kretak commanded the fleet from his massive dreadnought, while Emperor Zethmar watched from his palace on Hegemon, primed through real-time communications. Captain Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at the tactical display. 400 Allied ships faced the largest armada in galactic history. The rebel vessels were a mixture of stolen Imperial ships, captured freighters, and modified civilian craft. They looked small and insignificant compared to the perfect lines of the Imperial fleet. Sir, the enemy is broadcasting surrender demands. Yunji reported. Put them through. War Marshal Kretak appeared on the main screen. His forearms were folded across his armored chest, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Human commander, this is your final chance. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Continue to resist, and we will burn every world that has supported your rebellion. Daeho stepped forward. Marshal, this is Captain Kim. I have a for you. Withdraw your fleets and begin negotiations for peace. The age of empires is over. The Marshal laughed. It was a sound like grinding metal. You face 1,500 ships with 400. Your arrogance will be your doom. Numbers are not everything, Marshal. You are about to learn what happens when the hunter becomes the hunted. The transmission ended. Kretak turned to his tactical officers. Begin the attack. Standard Imperial formation. Destroy their command ships first. But the human and rebel fleet did not wait for the Imperial attack to begin. They struck first, using a tactic that no Imperial commander had ever seen. The entire Allied fleet suddenly split into 50 small groups of 8 ships each. Each group moved in a different direction at maximum speed. Sir, the enemy fleet is scattering, reported the Imperial tactical officer. Should we pursue? Of course, pursue. They are running away like cowards. The Imperial fleet broke formation to chase the fleeing enemy groups. 1,500 ships became 50 separate hunting parties, each pursuing 8 rebel vessels. It was exactly what the humans wanted. All groups, this is Captain Kim Daeho, broadcast on the secured Allied network. Execute Plan Omega. Show them what we learned from the wolves. What happened next had never been seen in space warfare. The fleeing rebel groups suddenly turned and attacked their pursuers, but they did not attack one at a time. All 50 groups struck simultaneously using coordinated pack tactics. 8 ships working together could not defeat 30 Imperial vessels in a straight fight. But 8 ships working together could cripple the lead Imperial ship, disable its communications, and then vanish before the other ships could respond. When the Imperial ships tried to regroup, they found their commanders dead or captured, and their communications jammed on engineer. Soman Park had spent months preparing for this moment. Every rebel ship carried human-designed electronic warfare systems that could hack Imperial computers through their own sensor beams. As the Imperial ships chased their targets, they unknowingly allowed the rebels to take control of their navigation systems. Sir, we have lost contact with 17 hunting groups, came a panicked report to War Marshal Kretak. Their ships are no longer responding to commands. Impossible. Send fighters to investigate. But the Imperial fighters found something that made no sense. Their own ships were firing at each other. The rebel hackers had convinced the Imperial targeting computers that other Imperial ships were enemy vessels. The hunters were destroying themselves while chasing ghosts. On the rebel world of Gethmoran, former slave miners watched the battle. Through captured Imperial communication equipment, they cheered as they saw the mighty Imperial fleet tear itself apart through confusion and misdirection. The humans were right, said Valkara, a mining engineer who had learned human tactics. From intercepted transmissions, you do not need the biggest weapons to win. You just need to be smarter than your enemy. Back in Earth orbit, the battle had become a nightmare for the Imperial forces. Their rigid command structure collapsed when rebel infiltrators began broadcasting false orders that sounded exactly like legitimate commands. Imperial ships received contradictory instructions and began shooting at anything that moved. Marin Commander GI-1 SEO led boarding parties that appeared inside Imperial ships through methods that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Instead of fighting the crews directly, they released sleeping gas, disabled life support systems, and locked the Imperial warriors in their own cargo holds. "Sir, this is Admiral Vesper of the 3rd Squadron," came a desperate transmission. "My ships are under attack by our own fleet. Someone is sending false targeting data. We cannot tell friend from enemy." War Marshal Kretak felt the first touch of panic. "All ships cease fire immediately. Return to defensive formation around my flagship." But only half the Imperial ships received the order. The other half were following false commands from Communications Officer Yunji, who had completely penetrated their communication network. The Imperial fleet shot itself to pieces while the rebel ships danced around them like ghosts. Prince Verdan watched the battle from his comfortable prison on Earth. He turned to the human guard, who had become something like a friend over the past weeks. "Your people have done something impossible," he said quietly. "You have defeated the greatest military force in galactic history without destroying it. You have turned our own strength against us. That is what humans do, Your Highness. We adapt. We survive. We learn. And now you will rule the galaxy as we did." The guard shook his head. "No, sir. Humans do not want to rule anyone. We want everyone to be free to rule themselves." After 6 hours of battle, the Imperial fleet was finished. Not destroyed, but completely demoralized and disorganized. War Marshal Kretak found himself commanding fewer than 300 functional ships while the rebel fleet had actually grown larger as Imperial crews surrendered and joined the rebellion. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from Earth," his communications officer reported. Captain Deho appeared on the screen. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of different species, including several Imperial officers who had defected during the battle. "Marshal, the battle is over. Your emperor can end this war now with honor, or he can watch his empire tear itself apart. The choice is his." On Hegemon Prime, Emperor Zethmer stared at the tactical displays showing the destruction of his fleet. Around him, the great crystal towers of his capital city flickered with emergency lights as reports poured in from across the galaxy. The rebellion had spread to over 200 worlds. "My lord, what are your orders?" War Marshal Kretak asked through the communication link. The emperor was silent for a long moment. He had ruled for 800 years and conquered thousands of worlds. But he had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that turned strength into weakness and order into chaos. "Marshal, order all Imperial forces to stand down. Begin withdrawal to core Imperial worlds." "My lord, that means abandoning half the Empire." "Marshal, the Empire is already gone. We just have not admitted it yet." 6 months later, Captain Deho Kim, now promoted to Admiral, stood in the assembly hall of what had once been the Imperial Senate. Representatives from 500 worlds filled the great chamber. Humans sat next to former Imperial species. Rebels worked with reformed Imperial officials. The rigid hierarchy of the old Empire had been replaced by something new. The Galactic Confederation recognizes the sovereignty of all member worlds. Admiral Kim announced, "No species will rule over another. No world will be forced to submit to foreign control. We share technology freely and defend each other willingly." Engineer Zoman Park had established technical schools on 100 worlds, where different species learned to combine their unique abilities. The adaptive technologies that had defeated the Empire now served to build something better. Prince Verdan had chosen to stay on Earth rather than return to the remnants of the Imperial core worlds. He worked with human diplomats to help former Imperial worlds transition to self-governance. "You were right, Captain," he said to Deho after the Confederation ceremony. "The Age of Empires is over. But what comes next? Something better, Your Highness. Something that grows stronger through diversity instead of weaker. Something that adapts instead of breaking." Years later, the HSS Defiance was retired to become a museum ship orbiting Earth. Millions of beings from across the galaxy came to see the small, ugly vessel that had changed everything. The ship that proved that innovation and cooperation were more powerful than domination and fear. In the museum, Captain Deho kept a simple plaque that read, "In memory of all who died believing that might makes right, and in honor of all who live, believing that right makes might." The galaxy had learned that true strength came not from the biggest weapons or the largest fleets, but from the courage to think differently and the wisdom to work together. The human gift to the galaxy was not technology or tactics, it was hope. The old order had fallen not because it was weak, but because it could not change. The new order would survive because it was built to grow and adapt and learn. And in the endless darkness between the stars, the light of freedom burned brighter than any sun.